Network was one of 1976's most critically acclaimed films, receiving 10 Academy Award nominations and winning 4 of them, including Best Original Screenplay. For Paddy Chayefsky, the film's writer, it was the third and final Oscar of his career. Chayefsky's writing for Network can be described as almost rant-esque. There is this lyrical rage underpinning the film, spawning from Chayefsky's feelings towards the direction of the news industry and society in general. This creates writing that is sharp, cynical, but also comedic at times. Characters serve as personified representations of different worldviews, going on long, articulate monologues that come with an eloquence most could only dream they possessed. The closest modern comparison to Chayefsky is definitely Aaron Sorkin, and that's no coincidence. When Sorkin won his Academy Award for writing The Social Network, he began his speech by thanking Chayefsky and his work on Network for inspiring his own writing. While Sorkin currently participates in directing the features he writes, Chayefsky would stay solely a writer for his whole career. That meant for Network, the next step would be finding the film's director. Luckily, Network acquired one of the most emotionally and thematically skilled directors of all time, Sidney Lumet. Lumet is most well known for the timeless 12 Angry Men, a film many consider to be one of the best of all time, though his hand reached much farther than that. Real Lumet heads are going to be familiar with him for films like Dog Day Afternoon, Failsafe, and of course Network. Lumet was interested in finding, in his own words, the closeness needed for private, emotional revelations with his characters, making him the perfect match for Chayefsky's script. He humanizes the characters and makes them feel more like real people than just metaphorical symbols. The combination produced a film that is in many ways timeless. The film has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, an 83 on Metacritic, and a 4.3 on Letterboxd. It's been voted as having one of the greatest scripts of all time, adapted into a stage play, and even preserved in the Library of Congress. Most critics consider Network to be one of the greatest movies of all time. What I'm interested in today, though, is not Network's critical reception or preservation. No. What I'm interested in is how its thematic core has endured and is possibly even more relevant today than it was when it was released in 1976. When analyzing Network, there is no better place to start than the catalyst of the story, Howard Beale. Beale, portrayed by Peter Finch, is the longtime anchor for the fictional Union Broadcast System. After being told he will be taken off the air, he undergoes a manic episode, announcing his own suicide will take place live on the station before he is laid off. Beale's suicide announcement is treated with a coldness that exemplifies how to the network, the fears regarding Beale's announcement are only related to finances and the station's reputation. The only person who seems to show actual concern for Beale and his mental state is his boss and longtime friend, Max Schumacher, played by William Holden. Schumacher, acting as a surrogate for Chayefsky himself, can best be described as a representation of traditional network and societal values that are seemingly on their way out. The foil to his character is Diana Christensen, played by Faye Dunaway, who is head of programming at the network. Christensen is a representation of the modern television executive, and even society in general. In the words of Schumacher, "I'm not sure she's capable of any real feelings. She's the television generation. She learned life from Bugs Bunny. The only reality she knows is what comes over her TV set." Diana's lack of empathy, her only focus being profit for the network, leads her to see an opportunity in Beale that someone like Schumacher would never even consider. You see, while Beale's on-air suicide announcement did shock everyone watching it, it also massively increased the network's ratings. Inspired by this, Christensen steps outside her role in programming and suggests keeping Beale on the air. The parent company of UBS, annoyed that the news division has been running at a loss for years, agrees to her idea. They put Christensen in charge of the news division and fire Schumacher. The monotony of nightly news disappears, and Beale becomes a very loud and animated prophet. He goes on anti-establishment populist rants that serve as an outlet for a similarly culturally dissatisfied viewer base. His most famous quote comes from one of the first rants he ever does on the air, where he calls on his audience to scream, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore." The quote is equally provocative and hollow. On one hand, it sparks citizens all across the city of New York to join him in expressing anger against the system, but it also offers little direction or action for people to change the situation they are in. For the network, though, they don't care that Beale's rant isn't inspiring real change. His yelling is provocative and memorable, and more people than ever are tuning into the station every night. Howard Beale is more successful than the news ever was. In 2004, Jon Stewart, host of Comedy Central's The Daily Show, went on CNN's Crossfire. Crossfire had been running since 1986, under the premise of a debate show. There would be a Republican pundit and a Democratic pundit, and they would debate the political issues of whatever was currently happening in the country. In 2004, the Democratic representative on the show was Paul Begala, and the Republican representative was a very young Tucker Carlson. Stewart was supposed to be on the show to promote his new book, but instead he took the chance to publicly criticize the idea of Crossfire. To be more specific, Stewart claimed Crossfire was, quote, hurting America. When Begala rebutted that Crossfire was designed to be a debate show, Stewart claimed that the statement was like saying pro wrestling is a show about athletic competition. No, this is theater. The statement led to about 7 minutes of arguing between Carlson and Stewart, arguing that most likely led to Crossfire's cancellation and Tucker Carlson walking a path that results in the man we see today. This is what this debate is most remembered for, but I think what Stewart was actually saying here has been somewhat forgotten. In the same way that Howard Beale was no longer reporting news, Crossfire was not a debate show. It presented the facade of a debate that allowed the audience to feel that we're engaging with politics, but it ignored the core principle of an argument that gives purpose to the conversations. Arguments should come from a desire to better understand a different perspective, to try and change people's minds. Carlson and Begala were never interested in changing their minds. You can see this even in the Jon Stewart segment. Carlson is desperately trying to shift the discussion so we can take some light jabs at Stewart. He is not at all interested in trying to have a conversation with him. Crossfire, going back to the words of Stewart on the program, was just partisan hackery. As much as it tried to frame itself as debate, as something important for America, it could never escape that it was actually just entertainment with a veil of politics. What Jon Stewart asks is, what if Crossfire actually served for the American people? Soon, Beale's bombastic rants inspired the network to completely revamp his television presence. Instead of the nightly news, it was the Howard Beale Show. Instead of simply sitting at a desk, Beale would stand and speak to a live audience. The show would open with that audience screaming, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." Beale's prophetic presence had been turned into a commodity, every decision made to maximize the spectacle. An interesting question the network never fully answers is just how much Beale is aware of what is happening to him. Does he understand that he has been made into spectacle, or does he believe that he is actually making a difference? We know that before all this happened, Beale was contemplating suicide, but he seems to have put that behind him. Has his mental state just further deteriorated into delusion, or does he believe in his messaging where he does not care about the method? We get a hint towards Beale's true mindset when he, in a rare move, gives a direct call to action to his audience. He sheds light on the Saudi acquisition of the network and calls on his audience to call their congressman to stop the merger. This comes as something of a shock to Christensen and the other network higher-ups. They believed that Beale was simply their puppet they could use to maximize ratings and profit, not a man with serious political and economic power. The network is forced to go into crisis mode to clean up Beale's mess. The declaration sends a shockwave so far that Beale is requested to meet with the chairman of the network's parent company, Arthur Jensen. In my favorite scene in the movie, Jensen berates Beale for disrupting the natural order of capital and explains to Beale that his worldview is incorrect. Jensen explains that Beale sees the world in terms of people and nations, but that all of that is irrelevant against the mighty dollar and global economic systems. Because the Saudis have put money into the company, the Saudis must get it back through the acquisition. Jensen urges Beale to spread a new gospel more in line with the company's global interests. In this scene, Network reminds us that the news is simply an arm of the corporate machine. It can provide spectacle, it can pontificate on the state of the world, but it cannot provide real change. Because the second that Howard Beale rocked the boat, actually started having an impact, he was reined in. The primal forces that Jensen represents are always going to be in control. Beale was not a prophet. He was simply a tool for profit. In 2024, Washington Post CEO and publisher William Lewis announced that for that year's presidential election, the paper's editorial would not endorse a candidate. When releasing a statement as to why, Lewis said, "As a publisher, I do not believe in presidential endorsements. We are an independent newspaper and should support our readers' ability to make up their own minds." Other news outlets reported, however, that the Washington Post owner, billionaire Jeff Bezos, had ordered the paper not to publish the editorial opinion. With the possibility of a Trump victory and the fact that the editorial was sure to endorse Kamala Harris, it was believed that Jeff had ordered the opinion not to be published in order to protect his business interests from a new Trump presidency. You see, old Jeff had precedent that Trump would meddle with his business interests if elected president. During the first presidency, Amazon had sued the government, believing that a defense contract awarded to Microsoft was not given to them due to Trump's negative feelings towards Bezos. For Bezos, that meant some ring kissing was in order for the second Trump admin. And for the Washington Post, that meant they were no longer subject to the journalistic freedom they were used to. As Network tells us, you can do a lot of things when reporting the news, but you cannot mess with the money. After Beale's meeting with Jensen, he switches from a prophet for the people to a voice of the corporate machine. While more accurate to the true workings of the world, it is uninteresting to the audience, and the ratings of The Howard Beale Show quickly drop. To the network executives, who believed that Beale was almost a god, this comes at quite the shock. They want to take Beale off the air, but are unable to find a replacement and can't cancel the show entirely because Jensen has become personally invested in the messaging Beale is giving. There is only one solution to all of this. In order to get Howard Beale off the air, they will have to kill him. Christensen decides to stage an assassination of Howard Beale by the Ecumenical Liberation Army, a group that Christensen runs a television series on. This will both end the Howard Beale Show and boost the ETA's television series. The scene in which Beale's murder is decided has this wonderfully horrific casualness to it. My favorite line is from Robert Duvall, who plays Frank Hackett, a network executive, when he says, "Well, should we kill Howard Beale or not? I'd like to hear some more opinions on that." It's illustrated of how detached from humanity all these executives have become, their only worldview now being from a life of business that has consumed them. The only fear they express is that the network could be implicated, not at all that killing Beale is, immoral. Killing Beale is just a business decision to them, and a good one at that. They all agree to murder Howard Beale. There is this irony in the fact that the news organization only kills Beale once he starts preaching something closer to the truth, even if it is unintentional. Chayefsky writes Beale as a well-intentioned but overambitious mentally ill man, making his death more of a tragedy. In the modern world, though, our prophets of the airways come across as more actively malicious, and the idea that they would be interested in airing the truth seems almost silly. Chayefsky failed to predict how figures like Beale would evolve thanks to the internet. But I wonder if that matters. Beale, despite appearing to be the most important part of the story, is the best example of the force of nature character Chayefsky's writing style is known for. The character that gets more of the Lumet touch, undergoing a real character arc, is Diana Christensen. We watch as her decisions give her more and more power and respect within the network, but also watch as those same decisions remove any real emotional connection she had with others. By the end of the story, Christensen has become one of the top executives of the network, but she has lost everything that kept her attached to humanity. This helps enlighten us on the real point Chayefsky is making in Network. No matter whether you feel disdain for Beale or not, he is just a man. A man given an extraordinary amount of power through a television network. A television network that has no real care for what Beale is saying, just that people will listen to it. The real problem that Network critiques is the system that allows a character like Howard Beale to exist. It says that the TV business and other systems like it strip those who operate them of all their humanity, making them callous husks, only able to think in ratings and market share. It points the spotlight on the people who, without us ever seeing them, are ultimately in charge of shaping how we view the world and each other. The message of Network has evolved a lot since 1976. We've swapped our televisions for cell phones and our news pundits for online influencers. As a result of this, the lifeless news executive has also evolved into the detached tech CEO. The rise of online content created a brand new financial market, and many apps have been designed to convert every person's content preferences into advertising dollars. This means rewarding videos with high watch time and click-through rates, which, because of the ease to abuse our human biases, means influencers creating content that is alluring and often enraging. In many ways, the goal of the tech corporation has stayed the same as the TV executives we follow in Network: provide the spectacle and rake in the dollars. At the beginning of this video, I referenced Aaron Sorkin and the Academy Award he won for writing The Social Network. The coincidence that two films with Network in the title would win Oscars 35 years apart is not lost on me, and it is not lost on Sorkin. It's the first thing he mentions in his acceptance speech. Maybe the connection goes past coincidence, though. Maybe Sorkin understood that both movies were analyzing the same theme under very two different points in our culture. The Diana Christensen of yesterday has morphed into the Mark Zuckerberg of today. What Chayefsky and Network asked is if we really want those people in charge of our media that so many of us consume and parrot in our day-to-day lives. Do we really want the inhuman leading humanity?